Michael, you've been with AKF now 10 years or so. I'm interested to know a little bit about your journey pre-AKF and how you got to where you are.
Sure. A non-practicing lawyer.
Okay.
I grew up in Michigan, went to law school at Notre Dame, and pretty quickly realized that I wanted to work in international development, humanitarian efforts, longer-term development, and miraculously, all of that came to pass. Prior to joining AKF, I was working for a group called the International Rescue Committee for about 18 years, and 11 of those years abroad in a range of places from Bosnia to Iraq to Indonesia.
Amazing. And now here you are today.
Yes.
And I must ask, when I go home, my 5-year-old will be asking who I met today, who I've spoken to. So just help me think through how can I explain to her what you do,
Sure.
what the foundation does.
My 13-year-old and 8-year-old ask me the same things, including what I will have done today, but also what am I doing when I go to work. Well, I'm very privileged now for the last 9 years to help His Highness run the Aga Khan Foundation, which he started incredibly when he was 30 years old, now at 55 years ago. And we are a multi-sector, multi-country organization that works in health, nutrition, education, economic opportunities, civil society, food security, agriculture, a range of things, mainly in Asia and Africa. And put simply, we engage communities to understand their needs. We work with disadvantaged people generally, usually in very remote parts of these countries. We predominantly work in rural or mountainous areas, and we put a great premium on community engagement. It's a community-driven, community-led work. I think the heart and soul, the core of our work, obviously, is our incredible staff and the volunteers. We have about 4,000 staff and a good number of volunteers. And we put a great premium on partnerships. And there's a lot going on all the time, but it's a profound privilege, and these last 9 years have really been the most fulfilling for me personally and professionally.
Yeah, and if we go back before your time, so I think it was 1967 the foundation was first established or created. Can you give us your perspective on why it was established at that time? What was the thinking? What was the vision?
I think that there are a number of considerations that went into it, and I think, as you know, the Aga Khan institutions have been around a good long time, and I'm not entirely sure, but I think more than 100 years ago a school started in Zanzibar and Tanzania as an example. I think that it was time in the evolution of the network and perhaps His Highness's own thinking that he was interested in starting a well-regarded, broad-shouldered, well-established international development organization that would work primarily in Asia and Africa, including a number of the countries where the Jamaat is present, but not exclusively as well, and to put a premium on community-driven development, long-term programming, not short-term projects, but a longer-term vision. I think there was an understanding that the causes of poverty are deep and multi-generational, and he was interested in establishing an organization that would combine professional management, a high level of technical expertise, and also an outward-facing, partnership-oriented entity that would also be complementary to other things going on within the system as a whole.
And Michael, you mentioned the network just now. Help me understand, what is the difference between the Aga Khan Foundation and the Aga Khan Development Network?
Sure. I'll begin with the similarities, and I think we are all striving for the same thing, to improve quality of life among the communities where we're working. I think some of the points of differentiation, AKF places a great premium on partnerships. Among other things, we work with a range of international donor partners, and engage them on grant opportunities for AKF as well as the network as a whole. I think that would be one thing that's distinguishing. I think another difference is that we are a multi-sector agency. Most of the other agencies or entities within the network tend to be more single sector, the health, education, so on, whereas we are multi-sector. I think another difference might be that we don't run institutions per se. We don't run schools. We don't run hospitals or clinics. We engage a range of ministries in the countries where we work, again, international partners. And we're very much, I think, also more of a rural, mountainous focus. We have some urban programming, but our history and the lion's share of our portfolio would be in rural, hard-to-reach communities.
Okay. And how do you relate or work with some of the other?
We work. I think another dimension of AKF is that we work with all of them. Okay. Certainly, we work with the Aga Khan Health Services, for example. Try to be as complementary as we can to their work, with an emphasis on community health. For example, we work with ACFED IPS, the Industrial Promotion Services, the private business side, for example, on an initiative called Accelerate Prosperity, where we're supporting young entrepreneurs in our geographies. We work with the schools on school improvement initiatives. So I think we round out the portfolio as a whole, and are more of the public-facing entity. Okay. Within. We don't have privately run institutions within AKF.
And with such a variety of areas, how does the foundation prioritize?
Our priorities are what the communities establish as priorities. We obviously have parameters set by our board with our main sectors, and we sort of stick to that game plan, and engage very closely with our governance on what we're doing, where, why. But we are community-led, community-driven. The overwhelming majority of our staff are from the countries where we're working, for example, and we engage communities on what it is that they prioritize, what are their needs, and then we do as best we can to help them realize those things and add value where we can.
And can you share some specific examples of this community-led
Sure.
initiation?
Sure. Well, I just came back from Afghanistan, a place where I've spent a good bit of time over the last 20 years. We're working in extremely remote areas, but we work in 3,000 villages there. And we will go in and work through maybe established community structures or through groups that we bring together, including students, women, the elderly, business owners, you name it. And we hear what they want. So among the things that we learned over the years is that communities are interested in more support to young entrepreneurs in all of our countries, and how, do they have access to capital? Do they have access to, technical inputs? What it means to run a small business. Farmers would be another example. We do a great deal of work with small collectives of farmers. Mm-hmm. Seeds, sound agricultural practice, market value chain connections, for example. We're looking here at cocoa, which is a photograph from Madagascar. And we started in Madagascar some years ago working predominantly in raising rice crop yields, but we began to realize, and this is an example to your question, communities and farmers were telling us, what else can we do? And the idea was, are there higher value crops that we could grow? Cocoa being one, chili another, artemisia, which is a medicinal plant. So we began working with local farmers in that, and also working with them on sort of market value chains. What quality controls do you need to sell your product at the highest value? How can we help you maybe cut out the middleman? Mm-hmm. How can we use technology, cell phones, to understand, the going rate for cocoa in the market? Those would be some of the examples of things that we do.
Fantastic, thank you. And everybody loves chocolate.
Everybody loves chocolate. My children alone are keeping these people in business.
Absolutely. Excellent. Michael, in 2002, His Highness said,
"Development is sustainable only if the beneficiaries become, in a gradual manner, the masters of the process."
Quite a powerful statement, and I'm wondering if you could just share a bit, how's that informed the work of AKF? How is this kind of concept?
Well, that informs our work every day, and it is a simple statement, but a profound statement. And development is only as good as your processes to make it happen. And it must be community-led, community-driven. The needs must be community-identified and prioritized. And our job, quite simply, my job every day is to do what we can to support that. And you need to go into that, one, being a much better listener than talker, with a lot of humility. You don't come in with a box set of projects that you just want to sort of parachute into a place, but you need to take your time. You do that by hiring local people. We have, I think, more than 4,500 people maybe working for the foundation globally, and the overwhelming percentage of those people are national staff from where we're working. I just came back from Afghanistan, where our entire senior team is national staff, and that's the case in all of our countries virtually. And it's those things where you go in and engage communities, what they want. They have ideas on how to do it. And in fact, they know best how to do it. Our job is to provide technical inputs where relevant, to help resource these initiatives, and also to work with them so these things do become truly sustainable. Micro-hydels, small energy projects in northern Pakistan would be an example where communities identify what they need. We help them build these things, so they're providing the labor, but ultimately, after a bit of a transition period, it's all handed off and they're running them. And the word sustainability is critical in this. How can we work ourselves out of jobs? How can we get communities to stand up and stay standing?
And in light of this idea of community-led, sustainable approach and all the things you've mentioned, if I think about young people thinking about their careers, and you mentioned that when you were starting out, you wanted to explore international development. What advice have you got for people who are currently looking at their career opportunities, and how can they contribute? How can they give back? What careers can people be exploring?
I mean, to begin, follow your heart. If you can match your career with things you love and care deeply about, good for you. And I think that will make your career fulfilling, and you have a better shot at being good at it if you can do that. We're looking for a range of skills. The AKF, again, we're multi-sectoral, so we do need and hire people with very specific technical expertise. Nutrition, agriculture, civil society, economic development, a range of things. At the same time, we're looking for people that are good managers, the people that have a certain cultural agility. We work in a range of places. We're looking for people that speak languages. Technology, to say the least, is very important now. So flexible, adaptable, passionate, patient, but committed and driven. And I think I've been profoundly impressed with the caliber and character of the people that work across the Aga Khan Development Network. A broad range of people from a range of countries, a range of backgrounds, but I think they are united. We are united in a shared vision and a commitment to doing everything we can to bring that to life.
So we often talk about pluralism and the importance of it, and Hazra Imam refers to it often. In the context of the work of the foundation and the realities on the ground, what does that look like?
Well, in a given village, you have a range of ethnicities. Again, you'll have Sunni, you'll have other Shia, you'll have Marids, and we engage all of them in a structured way in what does this community need, and how can we go about that fairly, equitably, transparently. Transparency is a pillar of our work, as it is for any good development. People should understand what we're doing, why, the resources we have, who's accountable, and you have to get your processes inclusive, and it's also reflected in our staff. Where we're working, we are very mindful of building a workforce that draws from the different dimensions of a community, and that's critical.
Michael, you've mentioned so many different projects and programs in this conversation so far. Could you pick a few to sort of deep dive into and share a bit more detail?
Yeah, happy to. Myriad examples, large and small. I've been talking a fair amount about Afghanistan, but let me go elsewhere. We work in Portugal. Now the seat of the Imamate, His Highness, and increasingly we have a presence there. But AKF has been in Portugal for quite a long time. And we work in Lisbon, we work in Porto, we partner with the government. For example, one of the things that we do, there are a number of migrant youth in the country, and we work very closely with them in Lisbon, elsewhere, on the employability. How do we work with businesses? We train in IT, coding, for example, and have had quite a bit of success working with local business groups, government ministries, on getting these young kids employed. So that would be an example of what we do. I mentioned Madagascar, where we have a number of agricultural engagements now. We work in many countries in school improvement and education. We have an initiative called Schools 2030, where we work with 10 very large foundations who are supporting that program. It's a school-focused, sort of teacher-focused. It's 1,000 schools in 10 countries, including a number of countries where there is a Jamaat, including India, for example, where we are really studying very hard and measuring sort of what works in the classroom. That would be another example. I've mentioned Accelerate Prosperity, where we're working with young entrepreneurs. This is something that I'm quite excited about, and I think it is creating a lot of excitement across the network. Again, it's a partnership with ACFED, IPS, and we are supporting young entrepreneurs. And just to pick a few things, the IT education business in Kyrgyzstan would be one. An integrated virtual hospital in Pakistan would be another. A small business that is scaling the use of greenhouses in remote areas in Tajikistan. So a range of different things that we're doing. We do a lot of work in livestock, for example, in Syria and elsewhere. We're trying to work with farmers in Syria. We work in early childhood development in Syria, where there's a significant Jamaati population in Salamia. We have the Madrasa program, which is longstanding in East Africa, where we're working in schools and madrasas on sort of the caliber of education, community leaders, and the broader ummah, including Marids, but not only. And this is something that His Highness started years ago that we have continued to support. We work with the rural support programs, the AKRSPs, for example, in India and Pakistan. We work in Gilgit-Baltistan, Chitral in northern Pakistan, in some extremely remote valleys, where we have done a range of things historically, sort of good local governance, participatory governance, sort of accountability mechanisms around some of these micro-hydel energy projects that I described. But we're also working with small shareholder farmers on agriculture inputs, livestock. So there's a broad range of things that we do.
And you've mentioned a lot about the Accelerate Prosperity, the young entrepreneurship, and the work with migrant workers in Portugal. What's the experience of the foundation with regards to different genders participating in these programs? Is it fairly even?
Yeah, it is. We put, I think it was His Highness's grandfather, perhaps, that's educate a girl, and we put a great premium on equal access. We take great care to make sure that girls are included in our school improvement efforts, that young female entrepreneurs are supported through our work. We have things called village savings and loan programs, which are very modest, simple, but effective things where women come together and sort of pool their money. They can take loans, pay it back in, maybe to buy livestock, maybe to start a small business. So those would all be examples, and there are many, of where that we are very mindful of identifying, supporting, acknowledging the importance of women and girls in communities, in economies, certainly. And I think too, certainly over the last number of years, we've invested very heavily in sort of women in leadership within AKF. What are the career paths for young women? I just met, to go back to Afghanistan for a moment if I can, I met with 25 members of our female staff in Kabul recently. A range of issues, a fascinating conversation, and just the dedication, the commitment, profound. But they had very clear ideas of what they need and want from management, and we're doing, help us with career pathing, develop our skills. Many examples. Obviously, the investment that His Highness has made in nursing programs in Pakistan and Kenya would be an example. And a critical part not only of the health profession, but civil society in these countries as well.
It's going to be quite interesting to observe how this progresses over time, I guess, all the effort being invested now in that area, and how that will then hopefully spiral and grow in time to come.
I think so. It's an investment. And these are, we're addressing generational issues. And I said earlier, the idea is to work ourselves out of a job. But, the issues of poverty and lack of inclusivity are multi-generational. They are complex with a range of cultural, political, socioeconomic factors. And I think when we look at quality of life, we're trying to address as much of that as we can.
Michael, you've mentioned that AKF works in mountain regions. You've referred to the Rural Support Programme.
Yes.
And I'm thinking about climate change.
Yes.
How is AKF working with communities to think through impact of climate change, building resilience?
Well, it's a critical issue, and in many of our geographies, they're among the worst affected, from glacial melts to drought to more avalanches as a result of climate change and so on. So we do many things in no particular order. We do a great deal of tree planting. I think the foundation has planted close to 60 million trees over the years. We're now looking more at microforests, sort of dense tree growth, good for the environment, good for the climate. And if you plant fruit trees, for example, also good for the economy. That would be another example. We do a good bit of work in soil and water management, smart agricultural, sustainable agricultural practices, water conservation, water catchment would be another example. A lot of irrigation work. We solar panels, sort of alternative energy sources, thing we do, and we also sort of sound climate smart livestock management, something we do. Natural fertilizers would be another example. A range of things with much more to go. I think, as you know, Prince Rahim chairs the Environment and Climate Committee for the network now. I'm privileged to sit on that, and there's a much more concerted effort. We want to get to carbon net zero, so that not only working communities, but even our own facilities, right? Our generators, how do we get rid of generators? How do we move more toward solar panels? What kind of construction materials is the network using? As another example, how can we move away from cement to more sustainable building materials? So a broad range of things.
Quite the challenge.
Quite the challenge. The race is on, a huge amount of pressure. Globally, and a profound amount of pressure in our specific geographies because they're feeling it. And together with the Aga Khan Agency for Habitat, as you know, but others, the health, the AKU, AKHS, it's an all hands on deck approach, and there is an urgency to it. We don't have time to waste.
And so with that in mind, if we cast forward maybe 10, 20 years or beyond, from your perspective, what is the AKF of the future? What does success look like? How does it evolve?
Yeah, I think we need to continue to invest. Certainly, I've mentioned micro, small business. The world of entrepreneurs, I think need support, encouragement, and enabling conditions in the countries where we're working. Another very important effort is what we call the future of work. The number of young people, the different calibers of schooling in a number of places where we work. What are the relevant life skills and job skills that people are going to need? Obviously, technology is a critical dimension of that, but languages increasingly are an increasing dimension of that. Young people are increasingly mobile, and do they have the skills to move and to find work? And many studies have shown, people have more jobs than they used to over the course of a professional career. I think too we have to get the mix of secondary and higher education, as well as sort of vocational education opportunities, and that's something that we are tailoring and looking at in our communities. We can't forget agriculture. Many of the places where we're working remain primarily sort of agrarian, and how do we support small shareholder farmers? How do we move towards collectives where you can take a number of small plots of land, put them together, cocoa being an example, there are others, so that they are able to leverage their work more efficiently and also have a bit more selling power as well. So I think those would be some examples of the things that we need to do. But at the same time, we can't forget some of the other things. We work in places that remain in crisis, economic crisis, sometimes security crisis. So food security is important because in many high altitude places, or at least certainly some, there are still issues of nutrition, stunting in some places where we work. So we have to pay attention to the range and quality of food, the amount of food, and to make sure that children, adolescents, young mothers are eating well and eating healthily, because if they don't, their families are not going to benefit either. So I think, again, that many things go into the quality of life. His Highness understands that, and I think has built a network to respond to a number of those different dimensions. It's opportunity for education, for health, for employability, culture. I met His Highness back in February of 2013 now, and it was the last stage of my interview for this position. And I think I'd interview with 15, 16 different people, a couple of trips to Europe, some by video, much of it in person. And I wasn't really, I liked my previous organization and wasn't really looking to leave, but I got a call. And obviously when someone calls about the Aga Khan Foundation, you pick up the phone. We met in Eglemont in February. I think it was a Saturday, with just a few of us in the office. And we met for 90 minutes about this, with coffee and a casual but profoundly interesting, to say the least, conversation. And we touched upon a lot of matters. He and again, no particular order. He did talk about the importance of civil society, and civil society is a bulwark against fragility. He talked about the importance of pluralism in a world that was increasingly divisive, and an important part of the network, what was to advance pluralism. He talked about what it means to be the imam today, looking ahead, and he talked about his life of service. He also talked about AKF's work. He said, this position is for AKF, but think about AKDN, because we have so many component parts. How do we leverage them together? He talked about the mindset that it takes to do this work well. Development is not a short-term project. We don't parachute in short-term sort of grants-tied projects to a place. We establish programs, we establish institutions and assets, a way of working, a mindset. He was talking about his near to midterm thinking. And most people, when they're talking about midterm thinking, how far do you look out?
3 years.
3 years,
Yeah.
maybe.
3 years,
Maybe.
5 years.
He said, midterm thinking, let's say the next 25 years,
Okay.
in his words. So I think, all of us in the system, to a person, I think, feel profoundly privileged to work for His Highness directly. Look, I'm 63, right? I've done a lot of things, and every morning I get up, feeling energized, inspired, and truly profoundly privileged to work here. And to do my modest part to bring his vision to life. And we have a lot of work to do. The issues that we're confronting are profoundly complex, multi-generational. There was no quick fix for poverty, for remote places, but all of us are united, I think, under a vision that is both right and smart. And our job is to do what we can to bring it to life.
It's inspiring to hear you talk about that conversation, in the early part of your engagement
Yes.
with the foundation. If I think about, the last 9, almost 10 years, in this capacity that you currently hold, how has that relationship or those messages evolved? Any special moments or other stories that have informed your thinking?
A number. I've read His Highness's speeches. I've been privileged to be there for a number of them. I've been very privileged to have our AKF board meetings with His Highness, the AKDN committee meetings, but I've also, through the communications committee or the security committee or other fora within the system, I've had a good bit of time with His Highness. You occasionally get the call on your cell phone, unknown number. His Highness, then you sort of immediately pay close attention. So many examples. I picture him walking into a meeting, with a large bunch of papers under his arm, and he goes through them and read, comments, underline, bold, and he's always profoundly prepared, always forward-looking, and an interesting combination of things. Profoundly generous and pretty tough, and never ever relinquish the importance of quality in what we do, regardless of the context. And one of the things he said during that first meeting, and I've heard him repeat other times, we do what we can, but we do it as best we can. Mm-hmm. And I think that we all take to heart.
And you mentioned a number of the committees that you sit on,
yes.
And the board meeting experiences. What's the nature of his engagement in those meetings or in that committee?
Well, in depth. Obviously, he chairs these things, but he myriad levels of engagement. I think he's very much interested in the programs. What are we doing, and he wants to know, not just how we're engaging with small shareholder farmers, but in what and what difference is it making. I think he's constantly bringing our attention to impact and measurement, and are we really advancing quality of life things where we're working. So very much in the details, in the weeds, extremely prepared, but at the same time takes a macro view. He has a great interest in our partner engagement. We work with a range of international partners, with European Union, the Gates Foundation, AID in the US, the Norwegians, the Swiss, the UK government, many. And he's extremely interested in that engagement, mm-hmm. and always with good counsel and guidance on how to engage. And I've taken part in meetings, for example, with him, with the German foreign minister, just as but one example. From macro to micro, His Highness is deeply engaged, and that's been consistent through my now going on 10 years here.
So the pressure's on for you in those meetings?
Well, you better be on your game, certainly. But at the same time, His Highness combines his life of service, but with a deep commitment, with determination, a lot of wisdom, to say the least, and he does take a longer term view, right? When your midterm horizon is 25 years, you're thinking ahead. Yeah. and he can also be patient, but as long as there is progress. Now, it's been really one of the greatest privileges of my life to work for His Highness.
Michael, in the world of development, accountability and governance are crucial for all organisations to be quite heavily considering across the piece. Can you tell us a bit about how AKF thinks about accountability and governance? What does it look like?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a very strong governance structure in AKF, and I've been around a while, and it's as strong as anything I've ever seen. We've spoken a good bit about His Highness, of course, but His Highness's family is also quite engaged in the agencies and our work, including in governance. I'll limit this mainly to AKF, but I work under and through Prince Amin, His Highness's younger brother, Princess Sarah, Prince Rahim. They're on our board. Prince Hussein participates in our board. And the family is very complementary in what they do, but deeply engaged, very informed, and quite inspiring and hardworking. And I think that goes very much into good governance. It's also makes it all the more an enjoyable place to work. Candidly, I have a lot of engagement with Prince Rahim, Princess Zahra, Prince Hussein, Prince Amin, of course, in various committees on the board, and also in different sectors as well. And they're on a range of committees and other governance bodies, the executive committees, and so on across the agency. And I'm privileged to take part in a number of those. So His Highness's family, I think, the critical pillar of AKDN governance generally. What
have you learned from that interaction?
Many things. I think I've learned what is the essence of good development practice, and you have to consider many things. And I think I have learned to, and I'm learning still, what goes into the calculus of quality of life, and it's many different things. And we see them reflected in the sectors that are on evidence throughout the multiple sectors in AKF certainly, but across the network. But I think it's also reflected perhaps more importantly in just the way we work and the way we go about our work. There was nothing pejorative or patronizing or condescending or prescriptive in how we go about our work. And I'm not just speaking about AKF, but it's really all of AKDN and how the family approaches things. It's with humility. It's being a good listener, taking your time, building up wisdom, and bringing it to life. The premium of quality and best practice of knowledge, and I think all of that, and be purposeful, be committed, show resolve. But some things you can't rush. These are multi-generational problems. We have to look at them, even as we're doing everything we can now, with quite a long runway. And just I think I've learned the importance of an unyielding commitment to quality, regardless of context, regardless of circumstance. And that, I think that's a lesson that I continue to embrace here.
Amazing. I'm hearing you say a lot about the time horizon and the patience and taking time and thinking through sort of traditional leadership training or leadership buzzwords. These are not words that you often hear. Words like humility, words like patience, taking time. It's quite a different approach.
Well, I think so. I think it's the right approach. I think also, there is look. We can't sit on our heels and address issues of nutrition and food security. So there is the importance of doing things now as well you can. As His Highness says, do all you can as best you can, and we're doing that.
I'm feeling very inspired, and I'm very grateful that you've shared all this insight with us, Michael. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.